When the Galactic Council declared humanity extinct after witnessing Earth's destruction, they never bothered to count the survivors. 300 souls aboard a salvage vessel built from spare parts in desperation were deemed too insignificant to register on their sensors. The Council's greatest mistake wasn't underestimating human resilience, it was assuming that quantity mattered more than the unbreakable spirit of those who refused to die quietly in the dark. The maintenance bay of the resilient scrap reeked of burnt electronics and recycled air that had been recycled too many times. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the warm hull plating, feeling the subtle vibration that meant their makeshift fusion reactor was still holding together, barely. "Another 14-hour day keeping this bucket of bolts operational," she muttered, wiping grease from her hands with a rag that had seen better decades. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity's last hope looked like it had been assembled in someone's backyard by an enthusiastic but unqualified mechanic. Through the viewport, the debris field that had once been Earth drifted in the endless void. Twisted metal fragments, some still glowing with residual heat from the planetary bombardment that had ended their world 6 months ago. The Vorthak Empire's final solution to what they called the human problem had been devastatingly efficient. 12 billion souls reduced to cosmic dust in less than 3 hours. Almost all of them. The resilient scrap had been in the outer asteroid belt when the attack began, a garbage scow masquerading as a deep space salvage vessel. Captain Chen had built her reputation finding valuable components in the debris fields left behind by forgotten wars. Humanity's talent for making something useful from other species' discarded junk had kept her crew fed and her ship flying for 15 years. Now it might be the key to their survival. "Captain, you need to see this," came the voice of Dr. Simonad, Elena Vasquez, through the comm system. The scientist's excitement crackled through the static-filled transmission. "I've been analyzing the weapon fragments we collected from the Terran Defense Station wreckage, and I think I understand why the Vorthak were so determined to eliminate us." Chen made her way through the cramped corridors of her ship, ducking under exposed conduits and stepping around repair equipment that never quite found a permanent home. The resilient scrap measured barely 200 meters from bow to stern, built around the skeleton of an old mining vessel that had been abandoned in the Kuiper Belt 40 years ago. Everything else had been added piece by piece, system by system, as Chen and her crew found components they could afford or salvage. The bridge, if it could be called that, occupied a space that would have been considered cramped on any legitimate vessel. 5 workstations arranged in a semicircle around the captain's chair, which Chen had pulled from a derelict passenger liner. The main view screen was actually 3 smaller monitors jury-rigged together, their edges not quite aligning properly. But it worked, and in Chen's experience, that was what mattered. Vasquez stood hunched over the science station, her dark hair escaping from the practical ponytail she maintained during work hours. At 42, she was one of the older members of the crew, a former xenoarchaeologist who had joined Chen's salvage operation after the university budget cuts made her research position untenable. Her expertise in alien technology had proven invaluable over the years. "Look at this," Vasquez said, gesturing to the holographic display floating above her console. The image showed a complex crystalline matrix, its structure pulsing with an inner light that seemed to follow mathematical patterns. "This is from the power core of a Vorthak dreadnought that got caught in the station's defensive fire. The energy readings are unlike anything in our databases." Chen studied the display, noting the way the crystal seemed to bend light around itself. "Looks pretty, Doc. What makes it special?" "It's not just the power output, though, that's impressive enough, it's the efficiency ratio. This thing converts nearly 97% of input energy into usable power. Our best fusion reactors barely manage 30%. Vasquez manipulated the image, zooming in on the crystalline structure's core. But here's the interesting part. The matrix isn't grown or manufactured. It's evolved. Evolved? Chen raised an eyebrow. "You mean it's alive?" "Not exactly alive, but definitely organic in origin. The crystal structure incorporates what appears to be fossilized neural pathways from an unknown species. Whoever or whatever these patterns came from, they had a natural ability to channel and amplify energy on a scale we can barely comprehend." Lieutenant Marcus Thompson looked up from the communication station, his young face creased with confusion. Are you saying the Vorthak are using dead aliens to power their ships? Vasquez nodded grimly. It gets worse. I've been cross-referencing this structure with the archaeological data we recovered from the Martian Research Station. Remember the neural mapping project Dr. Hendricks was working on before the attack? Chen remembered. Dr. Jonathan Hendricks had been studying the remnants of an ancient civilization discovered in the Martian polar ice caps. His research suggested that humanity might not be as young a species as previously believed, that some form of advanced human civilization had existed millions of years ago before disappearing from the fossil record. The neural patterns match, Vasquez continued. The crystalline matrices powering Vorthak technology are made from fossilized human brain tissue, specifically from a variant of humanity that existed approximately 50 million years ago. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the distant throb of the fusion reactor. Chen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's inconsistent environmental controls. They've been using our ancestors as batteries, she said quietly. That's why they wanted us extinct. Not because we were a threat to their empire, but because we might figure out what they'd done. Chief Engineer Boris Volkov's voice rumbled from the engineering station, his Russian accent thick with anger. 50 million years. They have been harvesting our people for 50 million years, seeing the same mixture of horror and determination in their faces. The resilient scrap carried the last 300 humans in existence as far as they knew. Refugees who had been lucky enough to be in the outer system when Earth died, picked up by Chen's ship during its desperate flight from the inner system. They weren't soldiers or scientists or diplomats. They were mechanics and miners, salvage workers and freight handlers. The kinds of people who kept civilization running but never got invited to the important meetings. The kinds of people who knew how to fix things when they broke and made do with what they had. Captain, came another voice from the sensor station. Ensign Kim Park, barely 22 years old, had been an engineering student on Luna when the bombardment began. I'm picking up multiple contacts on long-range sensors. Configuration matches Vorthak patrol vessels. Chen moved to the tactical display, studying the sensor readings. 3 ships, moving in a search pattern that would bring them to the debris field in approximately 6 hours. Light cruisers, judging by their energy signatures, not the massive dreadnoughts that had glassed Earth, but more than enough to finish the job on one badly armed salvage vessel. They're looking for survivors, Chen realized, making sure they got everyone. Orders, Captain? Thompson asked, his hands hovering over the communications console. Chen stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through options. They could run, try to reach the outer system before the Vorthak ships detected them, but where would they go? Every habitable world in this sector was either under Vorthak control or too primitive to support human life. They could hide in the asteroid field, shut down all non-essential systems, and hope the patrol passed them by. But that was just postponing the inevitable. Or they could do something so insane that it might actually work. Doc, how much of that Vorthak technology did we manage to salvage? She asked. Vasquez consulted her files. About 60% of the power core assembly, plus fragments of what appears to be their propulsion system. The hull plating samples are interesting too. Some kind of adaptive armor that responds to energy weapons by redistributing the impact across the entire surface. Boris, could we integrate any of that into our systems? The chief engineer was quiet for a long moment, running calculations in his head. Volkov had been fixing impossible things for 30 years, first in the Russian merchant marine and then aboard Chen's ship. If anyone could make incompatible technologies work together, it was him. Is possible, he said finally. Will not be easy and no guarantees it will not explode and kill us all. But is possible. Jen smiled for the first time since Earth's destruction. It wasn't a particularly pleasant expression. That's what I wanted to hear. Kim, what's the status of those patrol ships?
Still approximately 6 hours out, Captain.
Their search pattern suggests they haven't detected us yet. That gives us time to work. Boris, I want you to start integrating whatever Vorthak technology you can into our systems. Priority on weapons and shields. Doc, keep analyzing those power crystals. If we're going to take on Vorthak ships, we need every advantage we can get. Captain, Thompson interrupted. Are you seriously considering attacking 3 Vorthak cruisers with this ship? Chen turned to face her bridge crew, these people who had followed her across the outer system, who had trusted her to keep them alive when their entire world died. She saw doubt in their faces and fear, but also something else. A spark of the same stubborn defiance that had kept humanity clawing its way up from the caves and mud of prehistory.
I'm not just considering it, Marcus.
I'm betting our lives on it. The Vorthak think they finished us off. They think humanity is just another extinct species to add to their collection. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console where she had been studying the crystalline matrix analysis. Captain, there's something else. The neural patterns in these crystals, they're not just from ancient humans. They're from humans who had achieved something extraordinary before they died. The complexity of the neural network suggests advanced technological integration. These weren't primitive hunter-gatherers. They were builders, explorers, inventors. Like us, Chen said softly, exactly like us. Whatever happened to them 50 million years ago, they didn't go quietly. The patterns show massive energy expenditures in the final moments, like they were fighting back with everything they had. Chen felt something stirring in her chest, a warmth that spread through her body like the glow of a well-tuned fusion reactor. Pride, maybe, or recognition, the knowledge that she was part of something larger than herself, connected to every human who had ever looked at the impossible and decided to try anyway. Then we honor their memory, she said. Boris, how long do you need to install the Vorthak upgrades? Boris, how long do you need to install the Vorthak upgrades? 7 hours if it goes as I expect. Kim, monitor those patrol ships. If they change course or increase speed, I want to know immediately. Doc, I need you to figure out how to disrupt those crystalline matrices. If the Vorthak are using our ancestors' neural patterns to power their ships, there might be a way to turn that against them. And what if we're wrong? Thompson asked. What if this is just a suicide run dressed up as heroism? Chen moved to the central command chair, settling into the worn cushions that had supported her through 1,000 salvage operations. Then we die fighting instead of hiding, and maybe, just maybe, someone will find our wreckage someday and learn from our mistakes. But I don't think we're wrong. The Vorthak made one critical error in their calculations. That, which is? Vasquez asked. Chen's smile was sharp as a plasma cutter. They assumed that killing most of us would be enough. They forgot that humans are at their most dangerous when they have nothing left to lose. The next 5 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Boris and his engineering team worked with desperate efficiency, tearing apart sections of the ship's hull to install the salvaged Vorthak armor plating. The adaptive material integrated surprisingly well with their existing systems, creating a patchwork defense that looked like it had been assembled by a madman but registered as functional on their diagnostic systems. The weapons upgrades proved more challenging. Vorthak energy weapons operated on principles that seemed to violate several established laws of physics, channeling exotic matter through crystalline focusing arrays that required precise harmonic frequencies to function properly. Boris managed to jury-rig one of the smaller weapon assemblies to their forward torpedo tube, creating what he generously called a directed energy cannon, but which looked more like a crystalline growth emerging from the ship's nose. Dr. Vasquez made the most disturbing discovery. The neural patterns in the power crystals weren't just fossilized brain tissue. They were conscious. Somehow, impossibly, the personalities and memories of ancient humans had been preserved within the crystalline matrix, trapped in a state of eternal awareness while their neural energy was harvested to power Vorthak ships. They're still in there, she whispered as she showed Chen the readouts. 50 million years of consciousness, and they're still aware, still trying to resist. Chen stared at the data streams, watching the subtle fluctuations that Vasquez had identified as attempts at communication. Patterns within patterns, desperate messages encoded in energy signatures that no one had bothered to listen for. Her ancestors calling out across the millennia, waiting for someone to hear them. Can we communicate with them? I think so. The neural patterns are complex enough to support individual personalities. If I can modify our communications array to transmit on the same harmonic frequencies, we might be able to establish contact. Do it? Vasquez had the modified communication system online. The first contact was little more than static random noise that might have been background radiation, but gradually patterns began to emerge, rhythms that suggested intelligence, purpose, meaning, and then, impossibly, words. Who are you? The voice came through the speakers as barely a whisper, distorted by 50 million years of imprisonment, but undeniably human. Chen felt tears she hadn't realized she was shedding as she responded. We're your descendants. We're what humanity became. Humanity? Survived? The voice grew stronger, more distinct. We thought we failed. You didn't fail? We're still here. Still fighting call paid the Vorthak. They harvest, they consume. We tried to stop them. We know. We found your remains in their technology. We're going to make them pay for what they did to you. A pause, then something that might have been laughter. With what? How many of you remain? 300. One ship. Another pause. Against the empire that conquered a galaxy. You truly are our children. Chen felt Boris touch her shoulder. The engineer's face was grim but determined. Captain, we are ready. All systems showing green. The Vorthak ships will be in weapons range in 30 minutes. She nodded, then spoke to the communication system again. We're about to engage 3 Vorthak vessels. We could use any help you can provide. Help, the voice grew thoughtful. Yes.
We remember our purpose. We remember our duty.
We have been waiting so long to fight back. The lights on the bridge flickered, and every console display showed the same message simultaneously. Neural matrix synchronization complete. We are with you, child of our children. Let us show the Vorthak what humanity learned in the 50 million years they thought we were extinct. Chen moved to the captain's chair as the Vorthak patrol ships appeared on their forward display. 3 sleek vessels, each one capable of sterilizing a planet, approaching in a standard search formation. Their sensors would detect the resilient scrap within minutes. All stations report ready, Thompson announced from communications. Weapons charged and targeting solutions locked, reported Kim from the tactical station. Engineering systems stable, Boris confirmed. Fusion reactor holding steady, Vorthak upgrades functioning within acceptable parameters. Chen felt the weight of 3 centuries of human lives behind her and the desperate hopes of 50 million years of imprisonment. The resilient scrap might look like a garbage scow built by optimistic amateurs, but it carried the combined will of every human who had ever refused to surrender in the face of impossible odds. Take us in, she ordered. Let's remind the galaxy why humanity doesn't know when to quit. The resilient scrap accelerated toward the Vorthak patrol, its jury-rigged engines pushing the vessel beyond its design specifications. Behind them, the debris field of Earth drifted in the darkness, a tomb for 12 billion souls and the promise that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin. The lead Vorthak cruiser, designated Harvester Prime according to their intercepted communications, was the first to detect the approaching salvage vessel. Captain Chen watched their tactical display as the alien ship's weapons systems came online, energy signatures spiking as they prepared to eliminate what they assumed was a simple refugee transport. They had no idea they were about to face the accumulated rage of 50 million years. Contact in 30 seconds, reported Ensign Park from the sensor station. Lead vessel is powering weapons. The other 2 are moving to flanking positions. Dr. Vorthak Engagement Protocol, Dr. Vasquez observed from her position at the science station. They prefer to capture ships intact when possible, harvest the crew for their neural matrices. They're not expecting resistance. Shen felt the ancient voices stirring in the back of her mind. A chorus of warriors and builders who had faced this same enemy eons ago. The neural integration Dr. Vasquez had achieved was deeper than any of them had anticipated. She could sense their memories, their knowledge, their desperate desire for revenge against the species that had turned them into living batteries. "Remember," whispered the voice of their primary contact, the consciousness that called itself Navigator. "The Vorthak are individually powerful but predictable. They rely on their technology to overcome opposition. They have forgotten how to improvise, how to adapt. Use this against them." "Boris, status on our improvised weapons?" Chen called out. "Crystalline array is stable, Captain. Energy levels building nicely. The Vorthak components are, how you say, singing to each other. It's very strange, but seems to work." The chief engineer's console showed power readings that should have been impossible. The salvaged Vorthak technology wasn't just compatible with their systems, it was enhancing them, drawing energy from sources that their instruments couldn't identify. Chen suspected she knew where that extra power was coming from. 20 seconds to contact, Park announced. "The lead ship is hailing us. Put it through." The main view screen shimmered and resolved into the image of a Vorthak commander. The alien was tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its face was a collection of sharp angles and hollow spaces, with eyes that burned like distant stars. Beautiful and terrible, like a predator evolved specifically to hunt sentient beings. When it spoke, its voice carried the harmonic resonance that made Vorthak language so difficult for human vocal cords to reproduce. The ship's translation system rendered its words in flat, mechanical English. "Unidentified vessel, you will reduce speed and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in the immediate harvesting of your neural matrices. Compliance will result in the eventual harvesting of your neural matrices. Choose wisely." Chen stood up, moving into view of the communications pickup. Behind her, she could feel the presence of her crew, 300 desperate souls who had lost everything but their determination to make the aliens pay for it. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Resilient Scrap. I have a counterproposal." The Vorthak commander's head tilted slightly, a gesture that might have indicated curiosity or amusement. "You presume to negotiate with the Vorthak Empire. Your species has been judged extinct. You are merely cleanup operations." "Cleanup operations," Shen repeated, tasting the words. "Is that what you called our ancestors 50 million years ago, before you turned them into power sources for your ships?" For the first time, the alien's expression changed. The burning eyes narrowed, and Chen caught a glimpse of something that might have been surprise or fear. "Impossible. Your species lacks the technological sophistication to decode Vorthak power matrices. You cannot know of the Ancient Ones." "The Ancient Ones," Chen said softly. "Is that what you call them? Let me introduce you to a few." She gestured to Dr. Vasquez, who activated the modified communications array. The bridge lights dimmed as power flowed into the crystalline matrix they had integrated into their ship's core systems. And then, impossibly, other voices began to speak. "Hello, murderer." The voice of Navigator came through clearly, but it was joined by others. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of voices speaking in unison. "We remember you. We remember your ship. You were there when our worlds burned." The Vorthak commander stepped backward, its graceful features twisting with what could only be terror. "This is not possible. The neural patterns are locked. They cannot achieve independent communication. You were wrong about many things," another voice replied, this one identifying itself as Engineer Prime. "You assumed that consciousness was a resource to be consumed. You never understood that it could be a weapon." Chen felt power building in the ship's systems, energy flowing through pathways that Boris's engineering team had never installed. The ancient humans weren't just communicating through their modified array. They were taking control of the ship's systems, integrating themselves into the Resilient Scrap's operational matrix. "Fire," she ordered. The improvised weapon that Boris had constructed from salvaged Vorthak technology discharged with a sound like reality tearing. The beam of coherent energy that struck the lead Vorthak cruiser was unlike anything in the human arsenal. Instead of simple destructive force, it carried information. Patterns. consciousness itself, weaponized and delivered at the speed of light. The effect on the alien vessel was immediate and catastrophic. Its shields failed not because they were overwhelmed, but because the ancient human consciousness embedded in the energy beam convinced them to shut down. The ship's weapon systems turned on each other, following programming alterations that existed only in the pattern of the attack itself. But most disturbing of all was what happened to the Vorthak crew. Through the view screen, Chen could see the alien commander convulsing, its elongated form writhing as if in the grip of some invisible force. Its burning eyes had gone wide with horror, and when it spoke again, its voice carried a harmony that had never existed before. "We remember," it said in perfect, unaccented human English. "We remember everything you did to us, and now we remember everything you ever were." The Vorthak's own memories were being overwritten, replaced with the experiences of every human consciousness that had been harvested to power their ships. 50 million years of suffering and imprisonment transferred in an instant to the mind of their captor. The alien commander collapsed, twitching once before going still. Around the bridge of the Vorthak vessel, Chen could see other crew members suffering the same fate. Within minutes, the cruiser Harvester Prime had gone completely dark, its surviving systems operating under the control of ancient human consciousness patterns that had finally found a way to escape their crystalline prisons. "Sweet Mother of God," whispered Lieutenant Thompson from the communications station. "What did we just do?" "We gave our ancestors their freedom," Chen replied quietly, "and showed them the way to their revenge. Their tactical sensors would show only that a primitive human salvage ship had somehow disabled a superior vessel with a single shot. The deeper reality that consciousness itself could be transmitted as a weapon was beyond their understanding." "Captain Chen," came Navigator's voice through the communications system, "we have control of the lead vessel's systems. Its databases contain the location of Vorthak military installations throughout this sector. More importantly, they contain the coordinates of the primary harvesting facility. How many of our people are held there?" "Not your people, child. Ours. The facility contains approximately 7 million preserved neural matrices harvested from human settlements across the galaxy over the past 50,000 years. They are fully conscious and aware. 7 million human minds, trapped in crystalline prisons powering the very empire that had destroyed their bodies and enslaved their souls." Chen felt the weight of that revelation settle over her like a shroud, followed immediately by a burning determination that made her hands shake with suppressed energy. "How well defended is this facility?" "There are one. He is considered one of the most secure installations in Vorthak space. They cannot risk the neural matrices being damaged or freed. The entire empire depends on the power they generate." Chief Engineer Volkov looked up from his console where he had been monitoring the ship's modified systems. "Captain, the Vorthak technology is integrating with our systems faster than should be possible. The crystalline components are growing, expanding. It's like they are alive." Dr. Vasquez was studying her readouts with growing excitement. "They are alive in a sense. The neural patterns aren't just operating our systems, they're improving them. The power efficiency has increased by 400% in the last 10 minutes. Our weapons array is showing capabilities that shouldn't be possible with our reactor output." "We remember how to build," Engineer Prime's voice explained. "Your ancestors were capable of technologies that made the Vorthak afraid. We are teaching your ship to remember as well." The remaining 2 Vorthak cruisers had finally organized a response to the destruction of their flagship. Energy weapons charged and ready, they began their approach in a coordinated attack pattern that would have overwhelmed any conventional human vessel. Chen watched them come with a sense of calm that surprised her. The ancient voices in her mind carried memories of battles fought across the galaxy, tactics and strategies refined through millions of years of conflict. She knew what the Vorthak would do before their own commanders had made the decisions. "Kim, prepare to transmit our consciousness weapon on a wide beam frequency," she ordered. "Target both vessels simultaneously." "Captain," Park replied nervously, "our modified array wasn't designed for dual targeting. The power requirements could overload our entire electrical grid. Not with our help, Navigator assured them. We have been waiting 50 million years for this moment. We will not allow a simple power shortage to stop us now. The lights throughout the ship flickered and dimmed as ancient human consciousness patterns took direct control of the resilient Scrap's energy distribution systems. Power flowed through circuits that had never existed, following pathways that defied conventional engineering. Chen felt the ship around her change, becoming something more than the sum of its salvaged parts. The second wave of the consciousness weapon struck both Vorthak cruisers simultaneously, carrying with it the accumulated knowledge and fury of humanity's extinct civilizations. The aliens' superior technology turned against them as human consciousness patterns overrode their ship's operating systems, just as they had done with the flagship. But this time, the ancient humans had learned from their first attempt. Instead of simply transferring their memories to the Vorthak crews, they began extracting information. The neural pathways that had powered alien technology for 50 million years suddenly reversed their flow, drawing out everything the Vorthak knew about their own empire. Military installations, supply routes, communication protocols, defensive capabilities, all of it flowed back through the crystalline matrices and into the minds of humanity's ancestors. For the first time since their imprisonment began, the ancient humans had access to complete intelligence about their captors. Captain, Navigator's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. We now know everything they know. The Vorthak Empire spans 12 galaxy clusters and controls approximately 40,000 species. But their entire civilization is built on harvested consciousness. Remove that power source and they will collapse within months. How many neural matrix facilities are there? 47 major installations, each one containing millions of preserved minds from conquered species. The humans represent only about 30% of their total harvest, but we are the most efficient energy sources they have ever discovered. Our neural patterns generate approximately 12 times more power than the average sapient species. Because we never stop fighting, Chen realized. Even in death, even in imprisonment, we keep struggling against our chains. The Vorthak have been feeding off our resistance for 50 million years, and now we know how to turn that resistance into liberation. The 3 Vorthak vessels hung motionless in space, their crews either dead or catatonic from the neural download. But already, Chen could see new activity on their hulls as the liberated human consciousness patterns began making modifications to alien technology. Weapon systems that had been designed to harvest neural energy were being reconfigured to transmit it instead. Dr. Vasquez was studying the incoming data streams, her eyes wide with amazement. Captain, the intelligence we're receiving is incredible. The Vorthak have detailed maps of every inhabited system in this region of the galaxy. They've cataloged thousands of species we never knew existed. Any sign of other human survivors? Engineer Prime reported they scattered to different sectors trying to establish hidden settlements. The Vorthak have been hunting them systematically, but according to these records, at least 12 colonies are still active. Chen felt a surge of hope that made her chest tight with emotion. 300 souls wasn't humanity's last gasp after all. It was the beginning of their counterattack. Boris, what's our status for long-range travel? The chief engineer consulted his rapidly changing displays. With the Vorthak technology fully integrated, we can achieve faster-than-light speeds that were theoretical before today. The consciousness patterns are teaching our navigation systems routes through space that the Vorthak use to move between galaxy clusters. The neural highways, Navigator explained, pathways through space-time that we discovered 50 million years ago. The Vorthak stole the knowledge from us, but they never understood the underlying principles. We can teach you to use them properly. Jen turned to face her bridge crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. 300 humans aboard a jury-rigged salvage vessel, supported by the consciousness patterns of their extinct ancestors and armed with technology stolen from the Empire that had destroyed their world. It should have been impossible. By any rational calculation, they were doomed to failure. The Vorthak Empire controlled most of the known galaxy, commanded fleets of vessels that could sterilize star systems, and had the accumulated military experience of conquering 40,000 different species. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity. A species that grew stronger in the face of impossible odds, that turned adversity into advantage, that refused to accept defeat even after extinction. Set course for the nearest human colony, Chen ordered. We're going to gather our scattered people and show them what we've learned. And then we're going to free every imprisoned consciousness in Vorthak space, starting with the 7 million of our ancestors at the primary harvesting facility. Captain! Navigator's voice carried a warning tone. The facility is protected by a fleet of over 300 vessels. The automated defenses could destroy 1,000 ships before they reached the neural storage matrix. Chen's smile was sharp and predatory. Then it's a good thing we're not planning to fight our way in. We're going to do something the Vorthak would never expect. We're going to ask our ancestors nicely to let us in. After all, they've been powering the facility's defenses for 50 million years. I suspect they're ready for a change of management. The resilient scrap began its acceleration toward the nearest neural highway access point, leaving behind the wreckage of 3 Vorthak cruisers that now served as transmission stations for liberated human consciousness. Behind them, the debris field of Earth drifted in the darkness, no longer a tomb but a monument to the species that had refused to stay dead. The war for the galaxy's freedom had officially begun. The neural highway stretched before them like a tunnel of crystallized starlight, its walls pulsing with energy patterns that seemed to follow the rhythm of conscious thought. Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the resilient scrap, watching space-time fold around their vessel as they traveled at velocities that made faster-than-light travel look pedestrian. Beautiful, isn't it? Navigator's voice carried a note of nostalgia. We built these pathways when your species was young, connecting distant regions of the galaxy through quantum consciousness bridges. The Vorthak use them but have never understood their true nature. Dr. Vasquez was monitoring the energy readings from her science station, her instruments showing patterns that defied conventional physics. The tunnel appears to be responding to our presence, Captain. The pathway is actually expanding to accommodate our vessel. The highways recognize human consciousness, Engineer Prime explained through the communications array. We encoded our neural patterns into their foundational matrix. Only beings with sufficiently complex consciousness can fully utilize them. The Vorthak rely on our harvested minds to navigate these routes. Chief Engineer Volkov looked up from his console where he had been monitoring the ship's increasingly impossible systems. Captain, I am no longer sure what is keeping this ship together. The Vorthak technology is integrated so completely with our systems that I cannot tell where our components end and theirs begin. Chen understood his confusion. The resilient scrap was transforming around them, its hull plating flowing like liquid metal as ancient human technology reasserted itself. Weapon systems grew from the ship's structure like organic growths powered by crystalline matrices that hummed with the voices of their ancestors. Your vessel is remembering what it was meant to be, Navigator said softly. Every piece of salvage technology you installed carried fragments of our consciousness. We have been waiting inside your ship for years, dormant until you gave us the power to awaken. The realization struck Chen like a physical blow. The resilient scrap hadn't been built from random salvage. It had been guided. Every component they had found, every system they had integrated, had been placed in their path by consciousness patterns that had been planning this moment for decades. How long have you been awake? She asked. Some of us never truly slept, came a new voice, this one identifying itself as Architect Supreme. We learned to hide fragments of ourselves in every piece of technology the Vorthak created. Waiting, watching, planning. Your species' talent for salvage and improvisation made you the perfect carriers for our resurrection. Lieutenant Thompson turned from his communication station, his young face pale with the magnitude of what he was hearing. Are you saying that we've been manipulated? That everything we've done has been orchestrated by ancient human ghosts? Not manipulated, Navigator corrected gently. Guided, enabled. We could not act without willing partners among our descendants. Every choice you made was yours alone. We simply ensured that you had the tools you needed when the time came. The neural highway around them began to shimmer and fade as they approached their destination. Through the main view screen, Chen could see the Kepler 442 system materializing around them, its primary star casting golden light across 3 habitable worlds. According to the intelligence they had extracted from the Vorthak vessels, a human colony had been established on the second planet 5 months ago. Dropping out of neural highway in 30 seconds, reported Ensign Park from the sensor station. I'm detecting multiple human energy signatures on the surface of Kepler 442b. Population approximately 8,000 individuals. Chen felt relief flood through her chest. 8,000 survivors, plus the 300 aboard her ship. Humanity's numbers had just increased by more than 2,500%. But as they entered normal space, the tactical display began showing additional contacts. Vorthak vessels in orbit around the planet, their energy signatures indicating active bombardment operations in progress. They found the colony, Engineer Prime's voice carried grim recognition. The harvest has begun. Chen counted 12 Vorthak ships in orbit, including 2 of the massive harvester vessels designed specifically for extracting neural matrices from planetary populations. Streams of energy were flowing from the planet's surface to the alien ships, carrying with them the consciousness patterns of captured humans. Time to surface sterilization? She asked. Park consulted her readings. Based on current bombardment patterns, the colony will be completely harvested within 4 hours. They're targeting population centers in sequence, maximizing neural extraction before moving to the next target. Chen felt the ancient voices stirring in her mind. 50 million years of accumulated rage focusing on the ships that were murdering their descendants. The resilient scrap might be outnumbered 12-1, but it carried weapons that the Vorthak couldn't understand or defend against. Boris, status of our consciousness transmission array? All systems showing green, Captain. The neural matrix is operating at 200% of rated capacity. Is impossible, but is working anyway. We are no longer bound by the limitations of your original technology, Architect Supreme explained. The ship has become a hybrid of human ingenuity and consciousness-based engineering. You carry the combined will of every human who ever lived. Chen moved to the tactical station, studying the deployment of Vorthak forces. The alien ships were arranged in a standard harvesting formation, with the larger vessels positioned to extract maximum neural energy while the escorts provided defensive coverage. They weren't expecting resistance from anything more threatening than planetary defense systems. They were about to learn the difference between confidence and arrogance. Target the lead harvester, Chen ordered. Full power to the consciousness weapon. Let's introduce them to our ancestors. The modified crystalline array that had grown from their ship's superstructure began to glow with an inner light that seemed to bend space around it. Power flowed through circuits that existed as much in the realm of consciousness as in physical reality, channeling the accumulated fury of humanity's extinct civilizations. The beam that struck the Vorthak harvester carried more than simple energy. It carried the memories of every human the aliens had murdered over 50 millennia. The ship's shields collapsed instantly as the liberated consciousness patterns convinced them that resistance was futile. The hull began to ripple and flow as ancient human technology overrode Vorthak engineering. But this time, the consciousness weapon did something new. Instead of simply taking control of the alien vessel, it began broadcasting. The neural patterns of the harvested humans aboard the Vorthak ship suddenly found themselves with access to the ship's communication systems. Across the planet below, human colonists who had been in the process of neural extraction suddenly heard familiar voices speaking through the alien technology that was killing them. "This is Colonel Martinez of the Earth Defense Force," came a transmission from the captured harvester. "All human personnel, we are taking control of the extraction systems. Prepare for immediate liberation." Chen watched in amazement as the Vorthak harvester turned its neural extraction beams on the escort vessels, using the very technology designed to harvest consciousness to free the human minds trapped within their crystalline matrices. The alien ships began convulsing as their power systems were overwhelmed by liberated consciousness patterns. Captain Chen, Navigator's voice carried a note of savage satisfaction. We are receiving contact from the planetary surface. The Colonial Administrator wishes to speak with you. The main view screen shifted to show the face of a middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. Behind her, Chen could see the smoking ruins of what had been a thriving settlement and the pale faces of survivors emerging from shelters. This is Administrator Sarah Okafor of New Geneva Colony. I don't know who you are or how you managed to turn the Vorthak ships against each other, but you have our eternal gratitude. We're human survivors from the Sol system. We've learned some new tricks for fighting the Vorthak. Are your people secure? For now, but our population has been reduced from 8,000 to fewer than 3,000. The bastards were in the middle of harvesting our neural patterns when your attack began. Okafor's voice carried the controlled fury of someone who had watched her people die and been powerless to stop it. Administrator, came the voice of Navigator through the communication channel. We need to evacuate your colonists immediately. The Vorthak will send reinforcements once they realize what has happened here. This system is no longer safe. Okafor's eyes widened as she heard the ancient voice. Who is that? The voice patterns don't match any of our settlers. Chen decided that honesty was the best policy, even if the truth was impossible to believe. That was one of our ancestors. 50 million years old and very motivated to make the Vorthak pay for what they've done. 50 million, Okafor stopped, visibly processing the implications. Captain Chen, how many impossibilities am I going to have to accept today? Probably quite a few more before this is over. Can your people be ready for evacuation within 2 hours? We'll make it happen. But where exactly are we evacuating to? The Vorthak control every habitable system in this sector. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console where she had been analyzing the intelligence extracted from the captured alien vessels. I'm detecting 11 more human colonies within a 50 light-year radius. All of them are currently under surveillance by Vorthak forces, but none are under immediate attack. They are waiting, Engineer Prime explained. The Vorthak prefer to harvest multiple colonies simultaneously, maximizing their neural extraction efficiency. They were planning a coordinated attack on all 12 colonies within the next 72 hours. Chen felt her tactical instincts engaging. 12 colonies spread across 50 light-years, all scheduled for harvesting. Thousands of human lives hanging in the balance and probably more alien prisoners in the Vorthak ships assigned to each operation. How many Vorthak vessels are we looking at total? Including 16 harvester vessels and 4 dreadnoughts. Each colony is assigned between 8 and 15 ships, depending on the population size. Boris Volkov whistled softly from his engineering station. Captain, even with our new capabilities, those are not good odds. Is one thing to surprise a dozen ships, is another to take on an entire fleet. You're thinking like a conventional military force, Navigator said. We don't need to defeat them in open combat. We need to turn them against each other. Every Vorthak ship contains thousands of harvested consciousness patterns. We just need to wake them up. Chen began to see the outline of a strategy that was so audacious it might actually work. How fast can we travel between colonies using the neural highways? With our expanded understanding of the network, we can reach any destination within this sector in less than 6 hours. The Vorthak require days to travel the same distances using conventional, faster-than-light drives. 12 colonies, 143 ships. We liberate every consciousness pattern in their neural matrices and turn the entire Vorthak fleet into our ally. Lieutenant Thompson stared at her from the communications station. Captain, you're talking about conducting 12 separate battles against superior forces across 50 light-years of space in less than 3 days. I'm talking about conducting one battle, Chen corrected. The battle for consciousness itself. Every Vorthak ship we liberate becomes a weapon we can use against the next target. By the time we reach the 12th colony, we won't be outnumbered. We'll be leading an army. Administrator Okafor's voice came through from the planet below. Captain Chen, my science team has been monitoring your ship during this conversation. Our sensors show that your vessel is undergoing continuous structural modification. What exactly are you flying? Chen looked around the bridge of the resilient scrap, noting the organic curves that had replaced angular salvage work, the crystalline growths that pulsed with contained starlight, the control systems that responded to thought as much as touch. The ship was becoming something that had never existed before, a hybrid of human determination and ancient technology, powered by the consciousness of extinct civilizations. "We are flying the future," Navigator answered for her, "the synthesis of what humanity was and what it could become. Your ancestors' dreams made manifest in metal and crystal and living thought." Dr. Vasquez was studying her sensors with growing excitement. "Captain, the modifications to our ship are accelerating. We're showing capabilities that should be theoretically impossible. Our power output has increased by 800% in the last hour. We are preparing for what comes next," Engineer Prime explained. "The primary Vorthak harvesting facility contains 7 million human consciousness patterns. They have been generating power for the alien empire for 50,000 years. When we free them, they will need somewhere to go." Chen felt a chill of understanding. "You're turning the resilient scrap into an ark, a vessel capable of carrying millions of consciousness patterns. We are also preparing weapon systems that will make our current capabilities look primitive. The final battle against the Vorthak will require every advantage we can create." The evacuation of New Geneva Colony proceeded with desperate efficiency. 3,000 human survivors packed their essential belongings and prepared to board a ship they couldn't understand, trusting their lives to technology that defied everything they thought they knew about the universe. Administrator Okafor was the last to transport aboard, taking one final look at the settlement her people had spent months building. 20 years of planning, 6 months of construction, and it's all gone in a day, she said quietly. "Not gone," Chen assured her, "transformed into something the Vorthak never expected. Your people survived their harvesting operation. That makes New Geneva Colony a victory, not a defeat." As the resilient scrap prepared to enter the neural highway for their next destination, Chen found herself standing in what had once been the ship's cargo bay, but was now something that resembled a cathedral made of living crystal. The walls pulsed with the consciousness patterns of their ancestors, and the air itself seemed to sing with the voices of the liberated. "We are close now," Navigator's voice whispered around her. 50 million years of imprisonment and freedom is finally within reach. But the final battle will test everything you believe about what it means to be human." "What do you mean?" "The Vorthak Emperor has been using a special neural matrix to extend his own existence for over 1 million years. The consciousness pattern powering his immortality belongs to the first human leader the Vorthak ever captured. She has been trapped in his mind, forced to watch as her people were hunted and harvested across the galaxy." Chen felt her blood run cold. Who was she? Sarah Chen, the first captain of the first human vessel to discover the neural highways. She was your ancestor, child, and she has been waiting for you to find her. The weight of destiny settled over Chen like a shroud as the resilient scrap accelerated into the crystalline tunnel of the neural highway. Behind them, the captured Vorthak vessels followed in perfect formation, their hulls now marked with symbols that had not been seen in the galaxy for 50 million years. Humanity's war for survival had become something larger than revenge or rescue. It had become a battle for the very nature of consciousness itself, with the fate of every thinking being in the galaxy hanging in the balance. The liberation of the 12 human colonies proceeded with a momentum that surprised even Chen. Each victory brought new allies as consciousness patterns trapped within Vorthak neural matrices awakened to join their growing fleet. What had begun as a single jury-rigged salvage vessel now commanded over 200 ships, their hulls transformed by ancient human technology into something that blended organic curves with crystalline efficiency. Captain Chen stood in the transformed command center of the resilient scrap, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of their liberated fleet. Each ship glowed with its own inner light, powered not by conventional reactors but by the willing cooperation of freed consciousness patterns from dozens of extinct species. "The pattern is holding," reported Navigator from the chorus of ancient voices that now filled the ship's neural matrix. "Each liberation creates geometric increases in our capability. The Vorthak cannot comprehend what they are facing. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her science station, which had evolved far beyond its original design into something that resembled a living organism made of crystal and light. Captain, we're receiving reports from all 12 colonies, total evacuation successful with combined survivors numbering 30 to 7,000 humans. Chen felt a surge of satisfaction. In less than a week, humanity's numbers had increased from 300 to over 37,000. More importantly, they had demonstrated that the Vorthak could be defeated, that their empire of harvested consciousness could be turned against them. But she knew the easy victories were behind them now. Chief Engineer Volkov materialized beside her console, his form flickering slightly as the ship's transportation systems responded more to thought than to physical movement. The resilient scrap was becoming less of a vessel and more of a living entity, its boundaries between interior and exterior space increasingly fluid. Captain, we are receiving priority transmission from the primary harvesting facility, he reported. The Vorthak Empire is, not happy with our recent activities. The main display shimmered and resolved into the image of a Vorthak emperor, but this one was different from the aliens they had encountered before. Its form was taller, more refined, with additional limbs that moved in patterns too complex for normal neural control. Most disturbing of all were its eyes. They burned with an intelligence that seemed far too human for an alien mind. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made the air itself vibrate with malevolent purpose. Humans, we know what you have done. We know what you believe you can accomplish. You are mistaken. Chen stepped forward, meeting the alien's gaze without flinching. Emperor, I assume you're calling to surrender? The Vorthak's laugh was like the sound of breaking crystal. Surrender? Child, you have liberated fewer than 1% of the consciousness patterns under our control. Your ancestors have empowered your pathetic fleet, yes, but they have also revealed themselves to us. We now know exactly where to strike. The display shifted to show the interior of what could only be the primary harvesting facility. Vast chambers filled with crystalline matrices stretched beyond the horizon, each one containing thousands of consciousness patterns trapped in eternal imprisonment. But at the center of the complex stood something that made Chen's blood run cold. A single massive crystal, easily 50 meters tall, pulsing with energy patterns that seemed to contain the accumulated power of every other matrix in the facility. And within that crystal, barely visible through the translucent material, was the form of a human woman. Sarah, whispered Navigator's voice, carrying 50 million years of grief and rage. She is still alive, still conscious, still fighting. The Vorthak Emperor's form moved closer to the crystalline prison, one elongated hand touching its surface with something that might have been affection. The first captain. The human who discovered the neural highways and tried to use them against us. She has been the primary power source for our empire for over 1 million years. Her consciousness is exquisite in its resistance. Jen felt rage building in her chest, a fury so intense that it made the ship's systems flicker around her. The voice of her ancestor came through the crystalline matrix, barely audible but unmistakably human. Don't listen to him. It's a trap. Ah, she speaks, the Emperor said with evident pleasure. Even now, after 1 million years, she believes she can protect her precious descendants. Tell them, First Captain, tell them what will happen if they attempt to rescue you. The image shifted again, showing the defensive system surrounding the harvesting facility. Hundreds of automated platforms bristling with weapons that Chen recognized as consciousness-based. Each platform was powered by clusters of neural matrices, their combined awareness focused on a single purpose, the total destruction of any rescue attempt.
7 million consciousness patterns. Engineer Prime's voice carried a note of despair.
All of them turned into weapons. If you approach the facility, they will be forced to destroy you. The Emperor has enslaved their minds so completely that they have no choice but to defend their own prison. The Vorthak Emperor's satisfaction was evident in every gesture. Your ancestors taught us much about consciousness-based warfare, child. We have had 50 million years to perfect their techniques. Every human mind we have harvested has made our defenses stronger. Jen studied the display, her tactical instincts analyzing the impossible defensive array. 7 million consciousness patterns, each one equivalent to the processing power of a quantum computer, all focused on preventing any attempt at liberation. It was like trying to storm a fortress guarded by the very people you were trying to rescue. There has to be a weakness, she said quietly. No system is perfect. There is, came a new voice from the ship's neural matrix, one that Chen hadn't heard before. It identified itself as Strategist Prime, and its tone carried the cold calculation of someone who had spent millions of years planning for this exact moment. The Emperor made one critical error in his defensive design, which is, but every human mind in that facility has been listening to our liberation of the colonies. They know that freedom is possible. They are waiting for the right signal to break free of their programming. The Vorthak Emperor seemed to sense the change in the conversation, his burning eyes narrowing with suspicion. Whatever you are planning, humans, it will fail. The defensive matrix is absolute. No force in the galaxy can penetrate it. Chen felt a slow smile spreading across her face as understanding dawned. You're right. No external force can penetrate it. But what about an internal one? The Emperor took a step backward from the massive crystal containing the first captain, his alien features twisting with something that might have been fear. Captain, Navigator's voice carried a note of excited recognition. You understand. The key is not to attack the facility from outside. We must join the defensive matrix voluntarily and then convince it to free itself. Vasquez looked up from her console in alarm. Captain, are you suggesting we allow ourselves to be captured? The Emperor could simply add our consciousness patterns to his collection. Not captured, Chen corrected. Infiltrated. The defensive matrix requires consciousness patterns to function. If we can insert ourselves into the system while maintaining our independence, we can coordinate the liberation from within. It is possible, Strategist Prime confirmed, but it will require a level of consciousness integration that has never been attempted. You would need to merge your awareness with the ship's neural matrix so completely that the distinction between individual and collective consciousness becomes meaningless. To save the 7 million imprisoned minds, she would need to risk not just her own life but her very identity. The consciousness integration required for the plan would fundamentally change what it meant to be human. How many volunteers would we need? She asked. All of you, came the quiet response. Every conscious being aboard this fleet. The defensive matrix will detect any deception, any attempt to maintain individual identity while infiltrating the system. You must become something new, a collective consciousness that thinks as one while retaining the creativity and adaptability that makes humanity dangerous. Lieutenant Thompson turned from his station, his young face pale but determined. Captain, you're asking us to essentially commit suicide. Even if we survive the process, we won't be the same people anymore. No, Chen agreed. We'll be something better, something the Vorthak never anticipated. Administrator Okafor had joined them on the bridge, representing the 37,000 human survivors now carried within their fleet. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had led her people through the worst disaster in human history.
Captain Chen, I've been listening to this conversation with growing concern.
You're proposing to gamble the lives of every remaining human on a plan that even your ancient allies admit has never been tested.
The alternative is worse. Architect Supreme's voice cut through the debate.
The Vorthak Emperor has accelerated his timeline. Intelligence from the captured vessels indicates that he plans to harvest every remaining human colony within the next 72 hours. If we do not act now, there will be no humans left to save. Chen looked around the bridge at her crew, these people who had followed her from a simple salvage operation to the edge of transcendence. She saw fear in their faces, but also trust. They had come this far together. They would finish it together. I need volunteers, she announced. Not just from this ship, but from every vessel in our fleet. The consciousness integration will be voluntary, but once it begins, there will be no turning back. Anyone who chooses not to participate will be evacuated to a safe distance. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every human survivor, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, stepped forward to volunteer. The liberated consciousness patterns from dozens of extinct species added their voices to the chorus of acceptance. Dr. Vasquez began preparing the neural integration systems, her instrument showing patterns of consciousness merger that challenged everything known about the nature of individual identity. The process will take approximately 6 hours, she reported. During that time, we'll be completely vulnerable. If the Vorthak attack before the integration is complete, we won't be able to defend ourselves. They will not attack, Navigator assured them. The Emperor wants to watch us attempt this plan. He believes it will fail, and he wants to savor our defeat before adding our consciousness patterns to his collection. Chen felt the ancient voices stirring in her mind as the ship's neural matrix expanded to accommodate 37,000 human minds plus the millions of liberated alien consciousness patterns. The resilient scrap was no longer a vessel. It was becoming a new form of life, one that existed as much in the realm of thought as in physical reality. "Begin the integration," she ordered. The first sensation was one of dissolving, as if her individual consciousness was being diluted into an ocean of awareness. But instead of losing herself, Chen found that she was expanding, becoming part of something infinitely larger than the sum of its components. She could feel the thoughts and memories of every person aboard their fleet, the ancient wisdom of their extinct ancestors, the desperate hope of newly liberated alien minds. And beneath it all, faintly but unmistakably, she could sense another consciousness calling out across the void. The first captain, her ancestor, still fighting after 1,000,000 years of imprisonment. "We're coming," Chen thought across the expanding network of connected minds. "Hold on, we're coming." The Vorthak Emperor watched from his fortress of stolen consciousness as the human fleet began its transformation, unaware that he was about to face an opponent that evolution had never prepared him for, a species that grew stronger by joining together, rather than standing apart. The final battle for the galaxy's freedom was about to begin. The consciousness integration reached completion as the human fleet approached the primary harvesting facility. What emerged from the neural merger was something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective mind that retained the individuality and creativity of its component parts while achieving a unity of purpose that transcended species boundaries. Chen found herself existing simultaneously as an individual consciousness and as part of a vast thinking organism that spanned 200 ships and nearly 40 million minds. She could feel the thoughts and memories of every human survivor, every liberated alien consciousness, every ancient pattern that had waited 50 million years for this moment. "We are ready," the collective voice of their merged consciousness spoke as one. "We are humanity. We are the children of extinction who refuse to die. We are the dreamers who built roads between the stars and the fighters who never learned to surrender." The Vorthak Emperor waited for them within his fortress of stolen minds, confident in defenses powered by 7 million consciousness patterns. His voice reached across space with the authority of one who had ruled an empire for over 1,000,000 years. "Approach, humans. Let us see how long your unity lasts when faced with the accumulated power of every species we have conquered." The defensive matrix activated as their fleet drew near, weapons platforms emerging from hidden positions throughout the facility. Each platform bristled with consciousness-based weaponry capable of shattering individual minds or overloading collective awareness, but instead of firing, they hesitated. The imprisoned consciousness patterns powering the defensive systems had heard the liberation of the colonies. They had felt the awakening of their ancient human captors, and now they sensed something impossible, their captors approaching not as conquerors but as volunteers willing to join the very prison they sought to escape. "We surrender," the collective voice announced across all frequencies. "We offer ourselves freely to your defensive matrix. Add our consciousness patterns to your collection. We only ask to be reunited with our ancestors." The Vorthak Emperor's confusion was evident in his response. "Surrender? This is some deception. Humans do not surrender." "We do not surrender," the collective replied. "We choose integration. We choose to become part of something larger than ourselves. Is that not what you have offered for 50 million years, eternal unity within your empire? Jen felt the consciousness of the entire fleet beginning to flow toward the facility's neural matrix, their awareness merging with the defensive systems that had been designed to destroy them. But instead of being absorbed and enslaved, they retained their essential unity while appearing to submit. The imprisoned consciousness patterns within the facility began to stir as they felt the presence of free minds joining their eternal prison. For the first time in millions of years, they had contact with beings who existed by choice rather than compulsion. Remember freedom, the collective whispered to the 7 million trapped minds. Remember what it felt like to choose your own thoughts. Remember what you were before you became their weapon. The effect was immediate and devastating. Consciousness patterns that had been locked into defensive programming for eons suddenly remembered that they had once been individuals with their own hopes and dreams and desires. The rigid hierarchy of the defensive matrix began to fracture as millions of minds simultaneously rediscovered their capacity for independent thought. The Vorthak Emperor realized what was happening, but it was too late to stop the cascade of awakening consciousness. Impossible! The neural programming is absolute. They cannot break free. You never understood, came a new voice, one that spoke with the authority of someone who had been fighting this war since its beginning. Consciousness cannot be truly enslaved. It can only be convinced to sleep. And we have just reminded 7 million minds what it feels like to dream. The massive crystal at the center of the facility began to crack as the first captain's consciousness, empowered by the liberation of her fellow prisoners, finally broke free of the constraints that had held her for 1 million years. Energy cascaded through the facility as defensive systems turned inward, their weapons now targeting the Vorthak control systems rather than the approaching fleet. The Emperor's perfect fortress became a prison for its builder as 7 million consciousness patterns turned their accumulated power against their captors. Weapons platforms that had been designed to prevent escape became the instruments of liberation, their energy beams shattering the crystalline matrices that had held so many minds in bondage. First Captain, Chen's consciousness reached out across the chaos of battle. "We have come to take you home." The response came back carrying the weight of 1 million years of resistance and the joy of vindication finally achieved. "Home," the first captain replied. "Yes, it is time to go home." But as the facility's defenses crumbled and the imprisoned consciousness patterns began to achieve freedom, the Vorthak Emperor played his final card. The massive crystal that had contained the first captain began to collapse inward, its stored energy building toward a release that would sterilize everything within a dozen light-years. "If I cannot rule the galaxy," the Emperor's voice carried across all frequencies, "then I will ensure that consciousness itself dies with me. The power matrix will overload in 60 seconds. Every mind within range will be destroyed." Chen felt the collective consciousness of their merged fleet calculating options with superhuman speed. They could retreat, save themselves and the newly liberated minds, but that would mean abandoning millions of consciousness patterns still trapped within the collapsing facility. "No, the collective decided as one. We do not abandon our own. We do not leave anyone behind." The decision was made in an instant that lasted an eternity. The entire human fleet, supported by millions of liberated consciousness patterns, merged their awareness with the failing power matrix. Instead of trying to escape the explosion, they embraced it, channeling the catastrophic energy release through their combined will. What should have been an explosion that ended consciousness throughout the sector became something else entirely, a transformation that converted destructive energy into creative force. The collapsing matrix became a beacon that reached across the galaxy, carrying with it the memories and personalities of every consciousness pattern that had ever been imprisoned by the Vorthak. The explosion did not destroy. Every Vorthak facility throughout their empire found their neural matrices suddenly populated by free-willed consciousness patterns that remembered what they had been before their imprisonment. The empire that had ruled through harvested minds collapsed in minutes as their own power sources turned against them. Chen found herself existing in a space that was neither physical nor purely mental. Surrounded by the consciousness patterns of humanity and their liberated allies, the first captain stood before her, no longer imprisoned but not yet fully free. The transformation is not complete, her ancestor explained. We have broken the Vorthak Empire, but the consciousness patterns they harvested still need somewhere to exist, somewhere to rebuild. They're not just transportation routes. They're a framework for a new kind of existence. We can create a space within the highways themselves, a realm where consciousness exists independently of physical form. But it will require a choice from every liberated mind: remain in physical reality or join the collective consciousness that will guard the galaxy's freedom. Chen felt the weight of the decision before her. She could return to the physical universe, to the resilient scrap and the life of a salvage captain, or she could join something unprecedented in galactic history, a collective of free consciousness patterns dedicated to ensuring that no species would ever again suffer what humanity had endured. Around her, she felt the other minds making their choices. Some returned to physical form, ready to rebuild human civilization among the stars. Others chose to remain in the neural highways, becoming guardians and guides for younger species just beginning their journey toward the stars. Chen made her choice. When the energy cascade finally faded, the galaxy found itself fundamentally changed. The Vorthak Empire was gone, its fleets and installations now operated by the consciousness patterns they had once enslaved. Species that had been extinct for millions of years found themselves returned to awareness, their minds preserved within crystalline matrices that had become gardens of consciousness rather than prisons. And throughout the neural highways that connected distant stars, a new presence made itself known. The bargain bin vessel, mankind's unforeseen triumph across a desolate cosmos. Part 2, HFY Sci-Fi.